Thank you. I believe I'm the only one here who was here for, and then Mr. Lucas was also here for Sarbanes-Oxley. You were here. Yeah. Damn. I'm not as old as I think I am. A few of us were here for Sarbanes-Oxley. We remember WorldCom, we remember Enron, and the need for a PCAOB. We were then here, even more of us were here, for Madoff and the need to apply the PCAOB to broker-dealers. We then reformed the PCAOB by making sure that China and Chinese-based companies would be subject to it. That was my bill along with Senator Kennedy, and then we accelerated that process with a separate bill. And then the most recent development was this committee voting to defund the PCAOB, transfer it to the SEC, and not give the SEC any funding or ability to charge fees in order to carry out the functions of the PCAOB. I want to thank the most powerful unknown person in Washington, Elizabeth McDowell, for the Senate parliamentarian for striking that provision. We should not defund the police in the streets, and we should not defund the police in the suites. That includes the CFPB and it includes the PCAOB. The bills that we are considering today include one that would allow auditing firms not to register with the PCAOB, but instead simply meet the standards of the AICPA. The AICPA was not consulted, the CPA caucus was not consulted, and the only standards that would apply to auditing firms were those meeting independence, not those dealing with their competence and breadth of experience for the audit that they were attempting to do. A second bill raises the dollar floor on which companies would be exempt and not have to have reports or as many reports on their internal controls. This makes some sense because we haven't adjusted that figure, I believe, since Sarbanes-Oxley. And so if the policy was right then, the dollar amount has to be changed now because $250 million then is very different from $250 million now. So I look forward to these hearings and working on these bills. As I said, I think the last time we were all in this room, the most fascinating issues that really the entire country faces are those dealing with auditing and accounting. And they are also the most important issues. So Sarbanes-Oxley was passed virtually unanimously. We need internal control. We need auditors to audit the internal control. And we need PCAOB to audit the auditors. And while this process may be expensive, you know what's more expensive? An Enron or a WorldCom or both pretty much at the same time. I think the losses to investors were, between the two of those, were well over $200 billion, but it's not just that. The loss of confidence in our capital markets cost this country even more than the $200 to $250 billion lost on those two stocks. I yield back. It's hard to know how much to invest in making sure that audits are accurate and that fraud is avoided. Reminds me of a bank that had a bank guard there. They said, hey, well, we haven't had a robbery in 20 years. Might as well fire the bank guard. You don't know until you find out. And the harm of Enron and WorldCom, and I think Mr. Coates has pointed this out, is not just to the individual companies and their employers and their stockholders, but entire industries and the market overall. And with Enron, I take it very personally because they also destroyed my state for several months by creating an artificial shortage of electricity and artificial blackouts when we had plenty of electric generating capacity. Also destroyed a governor of my state. There's been discussion of the proxy advisors. I am concerned that they also offer advice on how to get a good score. But as to complaining that right before there's going to be a vote, somebody could publish something that affects how people vote, and it might be a duopoly. Well, welcome to my world. The LA Times publishes things right before a vote. They don't let me see it in advance, and maybe it's a duopoly because we also have the Los Angeles Daily News, but it is at most a duopoly. We've got to explore the scope of what is required under Sarbanes-Oxley, what I think people have mentioned the frequency, but I think the quarterly and annual are probably the right frequency. And then most of this hearing is focused on who's exempted. We exempt on the basis of dollar thresholds, which tend to focus on the equity that is out there. Mr. Coates, don't public bondholders also rely on these financial statements? And is there any reason to exclude the publicly held debt when we're also looking at the publicly held stock in discerning these thresholds?
So the current exemptions, some of which are built into statutes, are crude. As you just noted, equity is not the only source of capital. Outside equity investors are not the only ones relying on financial statements. They could be more carefully designed. I want to emphasize, however, that,
let me move in another question. Does the PCAOB or the SEC have the authority under current law to make some of the adjustments we're talking about? Because there is an argument that these are arcane details that perhaps regulators can deal with better than us, or at least more frequently.
More frequently, more quickly, and they can monitor.
Do they have the authority under present statute?
They absolutely do. The one exception, this is something you guys could consider, letting them more carefully design experiments with their regulations. Currently, they're constrained to do that. I think you could consider giving the SEC the authority to test and then quickly change.
One thing that failed the test was the structure of Arthur Andersen. When I was doing audits, you had the audit partner, whose job it was to golf with the CFO, and the technical review department, and you couldn't issue the opinion without. Arthur Andersen had a don't ask, don't tell approach with their technical review department. I don't think any accounting firm has replicated that, but is it clear that under current regulations, you have to have a technical review department inside the accounting firm sign off whether the audit partner wants it wants that or not?
Thanks to the PCAOB and its standards and its inspections, audit firms routinely avoid that kind of cabining of information that helped trigger Enron. Yes.
And then one of the proposals, and the one I think I like least, is the idea that the auditor wouldn't have to register with the PCAOB, but rather just meet the standards of the AICPA. As I pointed out, the AICPA wasn't consulted on that bill. And I saw with Madoff that maybe the auditor was in technical compliance with the ICPA standards, but was manifestly incapable of doing the audit. They had a couple of CPAs, and Madoff had a big empire to audit. What are the downsides of not having the audit firms be approved by the PCAOB?
I don't think we want to return to the Bernie Madoff scandal. So no, it would not be, in my opinion, a good idea.
Thank you.